This is Atari Bit Podcast.
Winning the contest generated a little bit of prizes you could pick from Atari stuff, which was pretty amazing. It was like $2,000 worth of stuff, several boxes of stuff showing up at the house one day, and I thought that was just the greatest thing.
This is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-Bit Podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Chuck Gibke published one piece of software for the Atari computer, Air Raid. The game first appeared in the winter 1982-1983 APX catalog, where it won second prize in the entertainment category. I will read its description from the catalog to you. Air Raid by Chuck Gibke. Recommended for ages 8 and up, written in machine language. Head off the bombers before they reach the city. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Samuel quickly jumps into his plane and takes off. Once airborne, he flies straight for the bomber formation. A quick burst from his guns and the first one falls. The rest follow, and then the second wave. A piece of cake, Samuel gloats as he lands to refuel. Soon the next strike appears on the radar scanner. Taking to the air immediately, Samuel bears down on the lead bomber, but feels a nasty blast from the bomber's forward guns. Swinging in from behind, Samuel polishes off the remaining planes. Got to be more careful, he mutters. As Samuel engages another strike force, he suddenly realizes he faces a larger formation, and fighters. Panicked, Samuel dumps his tanks and quickly returns to the airstrip to refuel. The fighters are dogging his tail. A bomb falls on the radar beacon and the scanner blanks out. The bombs wipe out the airstrip. Samuel can't land. His aircraft can take no more, and the fight is over. You face exactly the same conditions as Samuel in Air Raid. You must defend your aircraft, the radar beacon, and the two airstrips against enemy bombers, which appear in increasing numbers, some with fighter escorts. You fly over the 8 scrolling screens of landscape. Your final score shows how good a fighter pilot you are, and Air Raid keeps track of the high score for the game session. The author invites questions and comments by mail and telephone. Review comments. The real-time animation is very good. This kind of game is possible only through machine language. The user manual is excellent, it's detailed and fun to read. Requires one Atari joystick controller. Ordering information. It was available on cassette, which required 16K of RAM, or disc, which required 24K of RAM. Either way, it cost $29.95. It was APX catalog number 20187. This interview took place on April 22, 2016.
Of course, this was all back in the early 80s, when the first PCs were coming out. I did study software in college when I graduated in the mid-'70s, and actually went to work at the time for Ling Temco Vought, and I did basically simulation and trainers there. But being a big kid, I always wanted some type of a computer at home, since everything was all at work, and they're all super minis and supercomputers and that kind of thing. So I was looking at a couple of different ones, and I remember one of the guys from church showed me his Apple II, I guess, that he had, and he wanted me to get one, and so we could swap stuff out. But I started looking around, and the Atari and what it could do just seemed to be more interesting. And so my wife quit work, I believe in '81, and ended up with a little bit of extra money, and somehow I conned her into letting me use it to buy a Atari 8-bit computer and see if I could do something with it. Where in fact, really, a couple of things that I got with it was a little cartridge called Star Raiders that I was really wanting to see how it worked and played, and so it got used for that a bit. But I ended up getting an Atari 800. I believe it came with a printer and a floppy drive, and I used a Sony Trinitron 15-inch monitor or TV that I got used, and all of it was probably about, back then, $3,000 in probably mid or late '81, and that was a lot of money back then. And I thought, well, what have I done? And so after tinkering around with the computer for a while, I don't remember exactly where I got the idea for the game, but I'm pretty sure like the Battle of Britain or something like that, somewhere where one poor soul in a fighter pilot is trying to defend some area from incoming bomber attacks. Mm-hmm. And so I gave that a try, and I came up with this little game and submitted it to Atari APX, Atari Programmers Exchange, and I actually tested it with some folks came home from church one Sunday night and gave it a go, and I had just spent the weekend working on a multiplayer control panel where the player, you'd have up to 4 players, and it kind of cycled through each one, gave everybody a chance. Then when I submitted it, the guy that I worked with at APX told me that was the first thing he wanted to get rid of. He wanted to just have somebody play it all the way through and then hand it to the next person and mm-hmm. play it like that. So we kind of did some back and forth, and I kept shipping off overnight copies of 5 1/4-inch Atari floppies to him. Probably not that many, maybe 3 or 4, I guess. And then finally, it was in a state where it was submitted to the quarterly contest in the entertainment division, and it ended up mm-hmm. winning second place. There's a couple others that were interesting. I think the one that won first place was like something like Quarks On or something like that. Anyway, it was a really detailed game. And there was another guy that, and I don't know if it was that quarter or earlier, Salmon Run, and I liked that one because that guy did a lot of good things with the sound using the sound capabilities of the Atari machine, and
mm-hmm.
I was amazed at what he could do, because all I could come up with some like beeps and chirps for my stuff. And so I was just looking through that catalog. It was the winter 82-83 catalog that it appeared in, and some of those programs and stuff that people came up with was really something. And actually that computer for its time was pretty good little development platform, even though it was floppies. I ended up buying another floppy drive to actually do my compiles and stuff, which were all in assembly language using the Atari.
You told me in email you used the macro assembler.
Macro assembler. For some reason, I couldn't think of the word macro, but yeah, that's what I used, and used a little dot matrix printer to print all that stuff out, and it's amazing how much work it takes to put together a game that it's total of about 16 kilobytes in things. But it did take advantage of some of the documents and stuff that were available back then. Atari made some technical documents available that described player missile graphics, and I believe that book, was it Day Ray Atari?
Right, yeah.
Was available back then. And then some of the magazines had some pretty good little tutorials on how to use the stuff and make the things work. And of course, they don't tell you exactly enough for what you want to do, so of course you end up some time tinkering with it, and said, wondering, why did I get that stripe all the way across the bottom of the screen to the top? And I wanted it just to be a little airplane-looking thing. And so it took a while to mess with that stuff, but it was fun. My wife was just telling me today that she remembered me sitting in the front bedroom, which was my first son's room, who was born in 82, and he would be sleeping in his crib, and I'd be working away on the computer, and she said I just was having a good old time playing with that stuff. The game, winning the contest, generated a little bit of prizes you could pick from Atari stuff, which was pretty amazing. It was like $2,000 worth of stuff. And so I ended up, after I figured out what I wanted, I ended up with several boxes of stuff showing up at the house one day, and I thought that was just the greatest thing. Couldn't believe that was happening. I did get a couple years of royalties off the game. There was a lot of stuff available in that catalog, and I was surprised when people would give it a shot, but they did try it.
Yes. Do you remember what prizes you picked when you could pick your hardware?
I know I got a couple of Atari 400s, maybe even 3, because I think I gave a couple of those away to like family members and stuff. I have no idea whatever happened to them. But and then a few other things. I'm sure I've got that information stored away somewhere. I told you that I had a lot of this stuff boxed up, and it's been boxed up for years. And though I claim that I never really throw anything away, I just have to find it is the problem. But that was good, and I did get royalties, probably enough to recover my initial hardware cost and maybe a little bit more. So it was overall it was a worthwhile venture. I did see the game in like a Sears store several years later. It was on the bargain. They had a bunch of APX on the bargain shelf, and I think it was like for $4 or something like that. But that's about the right price for that thing. So I was going to say that there was a book of Atari program reviews that came out, I believe, in 1984. I can't remember exactly the name of it, but it had my game in there, and they didn't give it a very good review. So looking at all the competition and stuff, I couldn't be completely disappointed, but it did get out there. Somebody thought it was good enough to win a prize, so I was pretty happy with that venture.
Nice. Yeah, the book was the Book of Atari Software, I think 1983 or 1984. I don't remember which year that was in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, the game, I mean, it has some resemblance to games like Defender and Protector. And did you use those as inspiration, or where'd the idea come from?
I don't know. I kind of thought maybe I was working with aircraft simulators at the time, and thinking kind of the situation at the Battle of Britain or some World War II scenario where it was just a defensive type thing.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted something that was a little bit more conventional rather than science fiction based. So that's kind of where that came from.
Sure. Yeah, I noticed on your resume that you worked at Lockheed for over 40 years, and it seems like that might have been taking work home, sort of. We're writing a game where we're defending against incoming bombers.
Yeah, I actually would take some of the printouts up to work, and I'd work on them during lunch at work, and try to get a little bit ahead so I could go home and type stuff in and see if it worked.
Nice. So, how did you learn machine language in the first place?
One of the classes I had in college, back then we started out, and in engineering they had you take a Fortran class. That's probably an alien word to a lot of people, but it was the main language back then. And after I took the Fortran class, which was required, I decided, well, that's fun. And so the next thing in the computer science department that I would take would be an assembly language course. So I took a assembly language, and the machine that they had us work on was an old Sigma 7 computer made by Xerox. And so it was basically gave you the idea of what it was. And so when I looked at programming this little game, I thought that BASIC wasn't going to be good for that, and plus you'd have to have the BASIC cartridge to play it. And so I wasn't intimidated by the assembly language, though it was interesting and challenging to work with it.
Nice. Did you program any other games? I couldn't find any on the internets.
No, not really. I did have another little project that was kind of interesting. A friend of mine who worked nearby worked for a counseling center, and they had a little talk show where people could call in and talk to some of the doctors that were on staff. And he wanted some way he was the MC and hosted it, and he wanted some way to monitor and kind of to manage who was calling in and that type of thing. So I came up with a little program with him using, I'm sure we used a 400, one of the extra 400s that I had, and we must have done something where we split the video to the monitor. So there was a monitor over where he was on his microphone, and we had a 20-foot joystick extension cord, and then the little program that I wrote, and somebody else would take phone calls, and they'd enter into this little program the caller's name, a quick synopsis of the question and put it in a little table on the screen, and then the other guy about 20 feet away could use the joystick to click through and then select the next caller, and then the guy back at the computer would make the necessary change to the phone line to connect them. And so that worked for about a year or so until I think they got something a little more sophisticated. But it was an interesting application of that hardware. I want to say that was probably in probably the mid '80s. I know it was before probably the Atari ST came out.
Neat.
But no other games.
Okay. And you mentioned you found a bug in some program, some game that came out, and you got a prize for your efforts.
Yeah, there was a software company that was putting out a bunch of adventure-style games that were on like multiple discs and stuff. And I can't remember the name of that company, but they. I was
wondering. You said it was 6 discs, and I was just like the only like. Maybe it was Omnitrend's Universe or something that came in like 100 discs or something ridiculous. So, I don't know.
No, I can't remember what it was. I mean, we're talking stuff over 30 years ago,
yeah,
and but they had several different titles out, and in their little catalog, they had to join their little bug club and look for bugs in some of their programs. Well, the ones for the Atari were written in Atari Basic, and so of course the source code's right there with Basic, and so you could look through there. And I was playing their game. I had bought it at a local store and was given it a try, and was partway through this first disc, and something happened, and it says it kept repeating that I was dying or something like that, and I said, well, how did that happen? And so so I said, I'll try to figure it out. So I looked through there and found out what the problem was. Back then with Basic, they had almost all your variables were global, and if you reused a variable name, then there's a chance that if it was used somewhere else, you could stomp on each other's toes, and that was just the case for this one. One of the little status routines would make a temporary change, but that would affect, with the right sequence of events, would affect a certain condition, and then you're totally hosed after that. You had to shut it off and start over. But I sent that in, and with the documentation, told them it occurred on each disk. So I told them where all the places were that it was, and sent the updated code into them and stuff, and they ended up saying, okay, well, we'd like that. What do you want for reward? So I gave them a couple of names of stuff, and I said, well, a couple of these aren't even ready to be put out yet, but we'll send you this one. So I did get one free game out of it, so I thought that was worthwhile.
Fun. What haven't I asked you about the Atari days that I should have?
I don't know. We did have a community of Atari people, and I think back then, without the internet, a lot of the folks came up with of course, Dallas-Fort Worth is a pretty good-sized area, and it didn't take long to find a local group that met in one of the Fort Worth suburbs, and they would swap parts and pieces and back then floppies were semi-expensive, and that some people would sell, used or new ones of those, and they just get together and talk Atari stuff. And then it went on almost all the way through the 80s, including when the ST came out, and also the little Lynx handheld games. We would get together and play the Lynx in multiplayer mode, and we would also play Mini Maze on the ST, the old where you connected the MIDI cables between multiple computers and,
right, yeah.
and played a multiplayer game. That was always a riot, and I always enjoyed multiplayer games. So it was basically the community was interesting, that there'd be people that with the same interest, and they'd all kind of get together and talk Atari computers and gripe about stuff, and also talk about things to try and what was new and what was worth buying.
Well, I think I have what I need. Thank you so much, Chuck.
All right, appreciate it. Glad to see the old Atari community is still alive and well, and it's interesting to see that it's generated interest like this. Appreciate it.
If you enjoyed these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.